You know, I'm really enjoying this game, but I just wish it had more crystals. You know, just like a ton of crystals. More crystals than you could ever possibly imagine. Perfect. Hello, my silly sacrificial lambs. It's Onion Creature back again with a review of the latest Kirby video game. That being Kirby and the Forgotten Land Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Star-Crossed World. This is an expansion of the original Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which, if you may not know, is my favorite Kirby game. So getting an expanded version of it for the Nintendo Switch 2. Goddamn, that is an exciting prospect. Not too much else to say before the review, so let's start it. Hello, my star-crossed friends. I'm here to talk about Kirby and the Forgotten Land Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Star-Crossed World. From here on out, I'm just going to be calling the game Kirby Star-Crossed World if I need to. That should make it easier for everyone involved. This is a $20 expansion, $80 for the full new version. And that's a little bit awkward. I've discussed this before, but yeah, the pricing model here is not ideal. This harkens back to the fact that Nintendo really just does not lower the price of their premium games essentially ever at this point. Just does not happen at all. So a game from 3 years ago, that's still going to be $60, and when you get a $20 DLC for it, it's going to be $80, and that's on the shelf alongside other games. Looks kind of awkward when it's technically just a 3-year-old game with new content. Oops. For one, you get a 60 FPS performance boost from the base game's 30, which is a massive improvement. This is potentially one of the most exciting things about this game. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is my favorite Kirby game, but the fact that it always ran at 30 frames per second was always the biggest blemish on that title. It's resolved here though. It runs buttery smooth. It was already a highly polished experience, but now it's just been taken to the next level. In terms of Switch 2 games that actually feel properly next gen, I would count this among them. The others I can think of being Mario Kart World, Fast Fusion, Donkey Kong Bonanza. What else have I played? Probably the air hockey game too. Sure. You also get a 1440p resolution boost. The original game was, I believe, 1080p with dynamic resolution. Yeah, 1080p on the higher end, but can dip. But here, we got 1440p. That's pretty freaking awesome, honestly. This is another good improvement, not nearly as impactful to me as the 60 FPS. Another blemish that has been fixed is that background objects now have a much more consistent frame rate. In the original game, objects and characters that were further away from the player could be at a lower frame rate. This does still happen a bit in Star-Crossed World, but not nearly as bad and not very noticeable a vast majority of the time, which you could not say for that original game. Again, one of the few flaws. So yeah, that original base game, which again is my favorite Kirby game, has been greatly improved from the state it was in on Switch 1 and feels properly next gen, which is what you want from a Nintendo Switch 2 edition of a game. I think Kirby and the Forgotten Land is a game that doesn't necessarily need 60. It doesn't require that much precision platforming or anything like that, but having it is such a major plus and really adds to the quality of the experience. One thing that I have not noticed much of a change with is the use of HD Rumble, now called HD Rumble 2 on the Switch 2. It was used sparingly in the original, which is something I didn't love. I would have preferred if HD Rumble was used a little less sparingly on Switch 1, but here on Switch 2, the situation really just has not changed much. It feels about the same as far as I can tell, which isn't necessarily that much of a bad thing. It's a relatively minor detail, but there you go. Speaking of HD Rumble 2, I haven't noticed it that much, except for Hollow Knight Silksong. Wow, that game has got some freaking haptics in it. Respect. Moving on, let's discuss the Star-Crossed World portion. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on the base game, you can check out my rather lengthy review I did back in the day. I also do discuss it in my Kirby ranking video this year. Today, though, I'm going to be discussing the Star-Crossed World section of the game, which is actually quite substantial. We get 12 new levels. The game starts with a meteor falling to the new world and starries scattering everywhere. Then this big island comes out of the ocean. You go there and you are sent on your way to go collect starries to prevent the world from being destroyed. You can access these stages from your original save file if you are upgrading the game. It seems to take place alongside the original story. Each new stage incorporates the meteor star effect, which is actually quite beautiful. You hit crystals to activate new areas with star effect. There's also sometimes crystals which activate timed challenges. And the visual effect of these star crystals is quite beautiful and gives this portion of the game a unique visual identity which is distinct of that from the main Forgotten Land sections. Some of the levels stand out more than others. Ones that stick in my mind are the water world, in which the sea is parted and you go along the ocean floor, and the Wonderia stage where you travel along a roller coaster track. There's lots of fun, unique level environments and mechanics that are exclusive to this expansion. Go in a little more depth than I think I might have expected. It's definitely not just those original stages. They have been expanded quite a bit and a lot of new elements have been added, which is great to see. The levels in general are pretty long. So even though there's only 12, they do feel quite substantial. Achievements are also much more difficult than the base levels, so I'd say they're quite a lot more replayable in that 100% completing each of the levels very well might take you longer than the base game levels. You mostly have the same enemies. Some of them have crystals on their heads and so take more hits. All of the mid-bosses, though, do have new forms with new attacks, which is pretty great. There's also these new mid-bosses called Galactas. They don't have a health bar, but they are effectively mid-bosses and take quite a lot of damage to defeat. There's 3 new mouthful modes included, as well as the incorporation of previous ones. Gear Mouth allows you to climb up walls and has some inventive uses. Sign Mouth lets you slide down slopes. Sliding down the winter level was a lot of fun, a really great set piece. Spring Mouth lets you jump up high. It's a bit like Spring Mario from Mario Galaxy. These new mouthful modes in general add a lot of verticality to the levels. They're quite fun and unique, and I appreciated their inclusion. Gear Mouth is likely the standout, just changes the gameplay the most. It was just probably the most fun to use. There's also some creative uses of the previous mouthful modes. I enjoyed their reincorporation in new contexts. The main collectible of this mode is the Starries. They function like Waddle Dees in the base game, and they can be hard to find, and some of the puzzles to get them are quite tricky, actually. There's some new Waddle Dee NPCs in the town as well. There's Astronomer Waddle Dee, who gives you new gacha figurines. There's actually 2 new volumes of those, and they're pretty spicy. We get some very interesting gacha figures in this new expansion, and I'll get to that in the spoiler section. Unfortunately, there are no new challenge levels, which is mildly disappointing. I was hoping for some of those to be included in this DLC. I think that's something they could have whipped up relatively easily. The new mouthful modes could have had new challenge stages or something. That would have been pretty fun. Slight shame that's not included. Oh well. The other thing is that there's no new bosses until the end of this expansion, which isn't terrible. I think I would have preferred maybe 1 before you get to that boss, but we'll get into that in the spoilers section. Overall, I would say Star-Crossed World, in terms of Kirby releases, feels most similar to Heroes in Another Dimension from Kirby Star Allies. It's more fleshed out than that. The idea of a second campaign that releases post-launch, that's more difficult and demanding, and that reuses elements from the base game but in new contexts. So I think there's quite a lot of similarities there, although this is of course paid and Heroes in Another Dimension was not, but there is a lot of additional content in this mode that was not in Heroes in Another Dimension, so fair enough. In terms of the new music, it does in fact slap, which I was expecting. It's great stuff. The tracks are quite lengthy and expansive. They all seem to incorporate the main theme of Star-Crossed World and remix that in with the base level themes. So it sounds really nice. Very high quality music tracks. Some of the best music in the game. With that said, I do have a nitpick with this soundtrack and the soundtrack of Forgotten Land. I do wish it had a bit more live recorded instruments. Some recent games which had that are Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and then some of the preview tracks for Kirby Air Riders. Also, I think with those, they are just using really high quality MIDI, maybe. I'm not really a music guy, this is all guesswork here, but the overall sound of the Kirby and the Forgotten Land soundtrack does feel a little too MIDI for me. I would prefer it sound more orchestral or live recorded, but I guess that is just a personal preference kind of thing. But seeing as this is such an ambitious game in terms of how it expands the Kirby series, I would have preferred a soundtrack that also felt like it was expanding just as much as all of the other elements of the game. But yeah, that's just some nitpicks. It really is looking a gift horse in the mouth at this point because I love this game soundtrack. It's phenomenal, but thought I would bring up that point anyway, in the hopes that maybe for the next 3D Kirby game, we get a more ambitious soundtrack, which is more suited to my tastes for these more ambitious 3D games like Donkey Kong Bonanza, Mario Kart World, Mario Odyssey. Having an orchestra or live recorded instruments, or at least instrumentation that sounds more live recorded, does go a long way at selling the scope of those titles, and I would like to see more of that with main series Kirby games. So that's my thoughts on Kirby Star-Crossed World. Definitely recommend it for the $20 price point. If you're buying it fresh for $80, that's a bit of a harder sell, I guess. I guess I would recommend it because I'm a major fan of this game. It's my favorite Kirby game, so I mean, I would recommend it, but you know, $80 is a lot of money, objectively speaking. So make up your own mind if it looks worth it to you, and I will now enter the spoiler section of the review. So let's go over the final boss. Once you get the Starries, you return to the crash site and are then flung underground after all these Starries have gathered and, I guess, unlocked this meteorite. This segment when you're underground is really creepy. I do appreciate when Kirby and the Forgotten Land gets kind of scary. It does that a couple times in the base game and it's very effective. Shockingly so. So seeing that incorporated in Star-Crossed World felt very appropriate. It's got a very unnerving atmosphere when you're underground. The use of sound design in this section is probably the best in the whole game. It's really a very unsettling soundscape and quite effective at building tension. You then fight, okay, let's look up this guy's name. I'm not going to be able to remember it off the top of my head. Okay, let's go. Let's try it out. Genuel Medion Elphalis. That's what it is. Oh my god. Yeah, they kind of went overboard on the name here. That's a bit of a wild one. I was pretty surprised to see an Elphalis variant. That was kind of shocking. I'm not necessarily disappointed. It's cool, but I was definitely expecting a different kind of boss for this section. Okay, this is the point of the review where I'm going to bring up that I was using base form copy abilities, non-upgraded, for the whole of my first run through of these levels and this boss. And that was fine. I basically did it because I wanted to savor these levels for as long as possible. So I'm like, okay, I'll raise the difficulty up a little bit by de-upgrading all of my abilities. That was fine for the base levels. Nothing was too insanely difficult. I think I died maybe once. It was totally acceptable. But when you get to the boss, the issue is he becomes kind of a massive bullet sponge if you don't have any upgraded abilities. So I was having a real struggle with that boss just on the base abilities. I think I died like 6 times or something, which is rather a lot for a Kirby final boss. You know, obviously difficulty does tend to go up by quite a bit in the end of Kirby games, but not usually that much. I did eventually go back, re-upgraded my abilities. I used sword, I think, because I'm just like, okay, I just want to get to the end of this battle. This is getting kind of ridiculous. So that was a very interesting experience. Can't say I've had that with any other Kirby games. I was able to get to the end, but I did have to re-upgrade my abilities. I probably could have made it through with unupgraded. It just would have taken a lot longer. It was getting late, and I was like, I want to go to bed, but I also really want to finish this. That was the state of things. So Meteon Genwell, let's call him Genwell. I can probably remember that. He uses crystal attacks, and the battle itself is quite cinematic and visually impressive. Probably the most visually impressive Kirby final boss. It's really cool. So you fight the first phase, which is quite similar to the first phase of the main game Elphalus boss battle. Then you get the second phase where he gets giant, and you can only attack him when he's near the stage, and he spends a lot of the time off doing attacks. At one point he gets giant buildings and starts using them as blunt objects to kill you, which is kind of fun, quite climactic. Goes pretty hard, I gotta say. Then you get to the final phase in which he turns into ball form. This part isn't too hard, but it's still pretty creepy. Kirby and final boss balls go hand in hand, so sure, why not? He has a distinct look to him, pretty creepy, kind of gross. That works well. At certain points in the battle, he encases himself in this pink crystal, which looks suspiciously similar to another pink crystal. When Genwell is finally defeated, the Starries go back into space, and the new credits roll, and the new credits theme is an absolute banger. It might be recency bias, but I think I might prefer it to New World from the base game. It's quite an earworm. It plays on your heartstrings. It's quite nice. Quite a lovely song. After defeating Genwell, you unlock Final Challenge ZEX at the arena. This was also pretty hard and took me quite a few attempts, even with Morpho Knight's sword, which I know is overpowered, but whatever. The final boss is a variant of Chaos Elphalus, but incorporating attacks from Genwell. Very good spectacle here as well. Playing through all of these bosses at 60 FPS was also really great. They're harder than I remember. Those parallel versions of the main game bosses are really quite difficult. Gorimondo, the parallel version of him, was doing so much damage to me the first couple times. I totally forgot his attack patterns. Definitely interesting to go through another arena challenge, but I really enjoyed that. It's a great cherry on top of the game. No crazy new bosses in here, just another new variant of Elphalus, but hey, why not? Now that we've done the spoilers, let's go over some lore revelations, because there are a few, not an insane amount, but certainly some. Firstly, the ships that you find in the deep underground section appear to be a prototype or some version of the lore Star Cutter from Kirby's Return to Dreamland. This was sort of lightly implied in the base game, but it's made pretty much confirmed in this DLC. Elphalus uses the same sort of dimensional portals that the Lore Star Cutter uses. It seemed quite likely. That just confirms that Maglore's ship is indeed made by the people of the Forgotten Land, which is an interesting new detail. Like to see it. Okay, now we'll go over the different Elphaluses. This stuff is a little less clear to me. So Genwell came to the New World after Elphalus failed, and he was also seeking to destroy it as Elphalus was. And the Starries are supposed to seal away Genwell. Obviously that didn't work out great once it landed on the Forgotten Land. It's also hinted that Elphalin, who is the soul of Elphalus, has interacted with Starries in the past, and it is implied that Starries may be the ones that sealed away Galactonite. Galactonite was speculated by fans to be appearing in this game just based on, I guess, the crystals, because Galactonite is encased in a crystal. The new enemy is called a Galacta, that mid-boss. I didn't personally buy into that. I wasn't feeling a Galactonite return quite yet. I think it'll definitely happen at some point, but he was just in Super Kirby Clash. Kirby lore, I will say, It's getting a little more, I wouldn't say confusing, just complicated. There's definitely a lot more depth that has been added in recent years. Keeping it all straight in my head is not necessarily the easiest thing, but I'm doing my goddamn best. So let's keep going. In terms of the story itself, I think it's solid, but maybe it's not the most exciting. It seems mostly to be an excuse to have these unique new level themes, which is fine enough. The new lore revelations are interesting, but they're also not necessarily earth-shattering if you have been paying attention to stuff that was included in the base game. I do appreciate how patient you have to be to get new details on the lore of the Kirby universe. This shows a lot of restraint on Hal's part, and I commend that. These tiny little details have been doled out over the years, and slowly you can start to piece together a puzzle, but there's a lot of pieces still missing. I'm very excited to see what they do next with it. One detail I wanted to point out is this billboard with the music artist from the Forgotten Land. The singer was present at the Kirby 35th Anniversary Music Fest and wore this hat, which I guess is the signature accessory of this singer. And that, as far as I'm aware, has not appeared in a game until now. So now we have in-game canonization of the Nichel hat. So very exciting for us all as Kirby fans to see that. There's also the detail, which I had not considered before, that there were people who stayed on the Forgotten Land, Nichel being one of them that is revealed in one of the figurine texts. And that was kind of a sad detail to read. I was like, damn, I guess some people just stayed here and I guess they died off. I don't know. A bit of a depressing thought, the people being left behind. As far as I recall, that was not explicitly stated in the base game. I could be wrong. So if you are a Kirby lore scholar, feel free to offer any corrections or clarifications. But I thought that was actually a bit of a tragic detail. The other Nichel detail is that the Forgotten Land meteor was a prophecy that was from an ancient text that was undecipherable until Nichel had a dream in which the words came to her and she put that to song. And then that song was predicting the events of Star-Crossed World, which happened however many years after that. They also include the detail that the song Nichel played, the Star-Crossed World theme, was played to calm the nerves of people boarding the spaceships as they went off the planet into the stars, and then continue to play on radio waves throughout the universe. Again, sad little details that we get in the figurine descriptions, which are slightly melancholy. Just interesting stuff. I am looking forward to seeing what lore details included here are incorporated into future games. I'm not sure what form that will take, but looking forward to it. All right, let's just wrap up with some additional thoughts. I do think this is worth the $20. Maybe it's a little steep if you compare it to a really great gaming deal. Like, I don't know, say, again, Hollow Knight Silksong. That's a great game so far that I've played. But, you know, I mean, in terms of a first-party Nintendo pricing model, $20 for this amount of stuff, I think is quite fair. The length gets quite a bit longer if you do try to 100% the Star-Crossed World elements. And then you do get those really vital performance updates, which really improve the overall experience by a lot. It patches up the only major flaws of the original game in terms of frame rate and adds the fun new content, which amounts to quite a few hours actually. I do wonder what is next for the main series of Kirby. Presumably Hal is working on a new project in addition to this one. I think it's likely that we're going to get another 3D Kirby game for the main series. 2D Kirby games are probably on the back burner for the moment. I'm not going to say we're never going to get another 2D Kirby game, because I'm sure we will at some point, but I think the priority is and probably should be on delivering another high quality 3D entry to follow up Forgotten Land. I have high hopes for the next entry. I think HAL Laboratory will probably get quite ambitious with it, if I had to guess. So really looking forward to that. But in the meantime, this is a great holdover that I would highly recommend if you've got a Switch 2 and a copy of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. If not, you know, it's a little bit of a harder sell, but I would still recommend it. I also want to shout out a video I did recently that you might want to check out. I reviewed the Tales of the Shire video game on Nintendo Switch. And this is a review I probably had one of the most fun times making in recent memory. So check out that one if it looks interesting to you. Alright then, see you later. Thank you for joining me, Onion Creature, on our venture into the star-crossed world. Hope you enjoyed it, and come back soon for more awesome videos that you will be sure to enjoy, I'm sure.